Number 1.
I've been working as a search and rescue officer for a few years now, and along the way, I've seen some things that I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time, they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff, and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander off too far. But I've had two cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man, and he seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall, covered in hair, like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other case was of a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name, before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could possibly have gone because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own searching with a canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine has led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down an embankment and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what had happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into the ambulance, and she let out one of the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like a whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another search and rescue officer that she killed herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another search and rescue officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who had gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to the base stop. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asked us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, and that she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of the base ops, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say, I was really happy when we left the area that night. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every search and rescue unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken, regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other search and rescue officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point, we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we are really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30-40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw one, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told, very emphatically, that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now whenever I run into them, because it happens so frequently. I have a lot more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell some more of them tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, let me know. Number 2. I have a friend who is going to post this somewhere on the internet. I'm writing it out in this old notebook for him, and he's going to correct most of my spelling and stuff. I don't know why I'm doing this. I know they're coming for me, and I won't be around much longer. I found stuff out I just wasn't supposed to know. No one is supposed to know. Ever. I wasn't even looking to find out. I just sort of stumbled onto it. But before I snuff it, I guess I just want to let the world know what I know. Maybe for once in my life, something I do can make a difference. My name is Buck. I'm just a bouncer in a little bar in Nevada, in a small town near a university and a military base. I'm not an educated man. I dropped out of high school, joined the army, did a couple of tours of combat. When I came back, I was a mess, like a psycho PTSD. I wound up being a junkie and a biker. I mean a bad biker. Until Selma came along. Love, man, it changes you. I got clean, retired from the club, and I got a job as a bouncer. About 6 months ago, this professor-looking guy started showing up and drinking alone. I figured he was from the university, but he was cool, never a problem. He would just drink, look off into space for a few hours, then leave. One night, we started talking when we discovered we were both Packers fans. Over a while, we got to be friends. He was down to earth and a nice guy, funny as hell, and he loved his football. Turned out he didn't work at the university, but worked as a scientist at the military base. He never told me until the other night what he did there. He would just shake his head and say, "It's fucked up. You don't want to know how fucked up it is." Then he would change the subject. I never pushed him or probed because I figured friends respect each other's privacy and I probably would have no idea what he was talking about anyways. So 3 nights ago, he comes in all happy and stuff and gets drunker than usual. He starts talking. "Buck," he says, "you've been a good friend." Then he hands me an envelope with about $5 grand in cash. I tell him I can't take it. And he looks at me dead in the eye, as serious as can be, and he says, "I won't need it, Buck, because they're going to kill me tonight." Now, I am not sure if that is just booze talking, so I ask him who. He tells me that the people he works for are going to kill him and make it look like an accident because he told someone what he did. I'm still thinking he's losing it when he tells me this story. "Do you remember that plane that went missing a few years ago? The one they hunted for all across the Indian Ocean?" I told him yeah, it was on the news for like weeks before people stopped talking about it. "The problem, Buck, is that it was never lost. It showed up at the right airport on schedule." He took a swig of his beer. "So why did no one say anything?" "Because half an hour later, the same plane landed at the same airport." "So there are 2 planes, but they are the same plane?" I know drunk talk, but this had a scary feel to it. He just nodded. 2 planes, identical copies." "What about the people?" "Yep," he nodded again. 2 pilots, 2 of every passengers, identical down to the last detail. So of course they called us." "Who are us?" I asked. "We are a bunch of scientists and others who work on these events for the government. This one is called a non-casual replication event." He said that last bit, enunciating each word. "So you guys try to figure out what happens?" He laughed. "God, no. Our job is to cover things up. The job of science nowadays is to just figure out how to turn things like this into weapons. If it had no military potential, then fuck it." He had a sad look on his face. "I was a whore. I prostituted my science." "So what happened to the planes? The people?" He nodded his head towards the military base. "In there. Both planes and both sets of subjects. We've been doing experiments on them to see if there's any way to weaponize the phenomenon. No luck so far. The experiments were pretty brutal. A lot of them died, but then they didn't exist officially, so we could do whatever we wanted to them. I mean, I didn't because I'm an aerospace engineer, but damn." It took a moment. "Some of them were begging to die after what we did to them." "What was that?" I could barely get the words out. He just shook his head. "I can't say. I mean, I won't. I don't even want to talk about it." We sat in silence for a bit, then he turned to me in his seat. "This is where I started not to want to be part of this shit anymore. They use those people like lab rats. Innocent people. No one deserved that. For me, the moment I knew was when I saw one of the subjects and I realized she looked just like my granddaughter. Then it just hit. These are people like me. How low had I sunk to forget that? So how come this was all hushed up? I mean, the planes landed at the airport, right? When the second request to land came in, we picked it up on our surveillance systems and dispatched the team to secure the airport. I mean, who do you think the NSA really works for? Us. We knew we had an event. The first one with the plane though, we secured the planes and passengers and secured the site. No one talked? I mean, air traffic guys, ground crews. He took a long time to reply. Directive 14. He said silently for a moment. Goddamn fucking Directive 14. It says that any and all steps necessary shall be taken to contain any information about an event. And that means we killed all of them. Accidents, heart attacks, lots of ways we have to kill people to make it look like they just died from some normal cause. Oh, wow. There was nothing else I could say. So, why tell me? I shouldn't, but honestly, I just feel the need to unburden, and I probably drank too much. Just never repeat any of this and you'll be fine. If I do tell anyone, Directive 14 will be in effect. I nodded, although now I was starting to feel nervous. What if this guy was for real? The reason I quit is that plane was only the first. Since then, 3 more planes have replicated. But we have a protocol now. Let the first plane land normally and destroy the second one. Kill everyone on board. We have enough experimental subjects, so we just use Directive 14. Kill them all. And we will keep killing them until we decide we can turn it into a weapon. Man, it makes no sense. Why? Because lots of events happen, and if people found out about them, it will shake things up. I mean, totally destroy religions, economies, and everything, because people will see there is so much more to this world than what we tell them. He laughed. Aliens, UFOs, and abductions, that is us, my agency. Misinformation, lies, and making anything out of the ordinary seem laughable, and only taken seriously by wackos. Because, my friend, buried in all that bullshit are several real facts. The bullshit hides it, because if people ever realize what is really going on, it will be the end. You mean, like the end of the world? No, he sighed. The end of control by that 1% you keep hearing about. As long as people don't know what's really going on outside of what the media and the corporations tell them, they won't have a reason to do anything other than be good little consumer units. Tonight, I said no. I won't be a part of it. I sent my whole story to that guy who wrote the story about corruption in the government. Documents, video, the whole thing. At that point, he got up and said he had to take a leak. That was the last time I saw him. I watched him walk into the men's room and he never came out. I went in to look for him and it was empty. One little barred window at the top. No way he could have gotten out. I figured he was having me on, and the next time he come by, we would have a laugh about it. But a day later, I read in the paper he drowned while swimming at a resort. The time in the paper was the same time he was with me, so that scared me a little. I looked up the reporter he sent the stuffs to. I called him and his lawyer answered and told me the reporter blew his brains out that morning. Okay, so now I really am worried about this Directive 14 shit. Tonight, a car followed me to work and parked outside. 2 guys in suits, mean looking dudes. The kind that don't look like they should wear suits. Just sat there and watched the bar. Chuck, my buddy, who sort of looks like me, borrowed my car to run an errand. They followed him. An hour later, the police showed up and told me Chuck died when he lost control of my car and hit a tree. I know how to disappear, and I fucking disappeared right then and there. I'm off in a remote place where I wrote all this out in this notebook. Hopefully it gets on the internet and maybe someone will read it. Or maybe I'll get Directive 14 first. Fight the good fight, people. Hello everyone, Mr. Creepy Master here. So, I forgot what the second story was as soon as I told it. Strange stuff. I think it's best that you guys forget that one too. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.